The Virginia colony between 1607 and 1722. The sources we analyzed in our spare time and in class, the main theme that I pulled out was that white Christian men created strict laws to prevent or to protect their interests and increase their wealth. The strict control they had on the law was critical for them to ensure their access to free and reduced labor. These laws further established the differences between the rights and treatment of servants and slaves. It also prevented intermingling and supported the idea that white Christian servants were still above slaves. This meant that from looking at how white Christian men governed and put laws out, they were putting laws out to protect and increase their own wealth and power. They were not as much as focused on like the general populace of white Christians. They were focusing on themselves gaining power, gaining wealth. At the same time, they hid that objective under the idea of protecting white Christian people. The Virginia timeline between 1607 and 1722. First settlement in Virginia started in 1607. It was Jamestown. In 1622, there was the Jamestown Massacre from Indians, and they had to build everything back up, and they did. The first African American brought over to Jamestown was during the time of 1619. It was a Dutch ship that brought over 20 or so Africans, and they were exposed to the idea that maybe having a slaves would it then be cheaper to have um, free labor, and slavery was a good thing to enact. In 1640, we see the first servant becoming a slave. His name was John Punch, and he decided to run away. And when he got caught, he then got punished severely and then became the first servant become slave. In 1662, there was the enactment of hereditary law, a slave law. This said that um, kids who were born from slaves and their owners, depending on the parent who they were born from, if born from a black slave, they would then become a slave because that they get their rights and freedom from the mother. While if you were born from a white woman, white owner, you would be free, but there would be a fine double the amount of the Henning statutes, which is a hefty sum. Then we see in 1705, we see the slave codes. We see in 1675 to 1676, we see the increase. Oh no, sorry, that's the Bacon's Rebellion. Oh, I think in 1698, the Parliament opens slavery to British merchants. This allows an increased flow of slave trade coming into the colonies, and Virginia started becoming more and more wealthy and influential. In 1705, we see the Robert Beverly writing about the laws in 17 of writing about the laws and how the treatment of indentured servants. And we see that indentured servants were treated differently than slaves. Male slaves were treated worse than indentured males, and then same goes for females. In this source, we see that an act concerning servants and slaves of October 1705. I noticed that uh, Act 11 prevented white Christian servants from being purchased by other races. This established this was established to protect the caste system that they have created, that the white slave owners and black slaves should not be mixed, and they can have a unchaotic way to maintain slavery. They created laws to differentiate certain servant and slaves coming into the colonies. They had to prove before they came that they were Christian, and if they couldn't, they would become slaves. Slaves got, and this also increased that the strict laws kind of enforced that even Christianity, becoming a Christian as a slave, did not free you from bondage or slavery. Robert Beverly, on servants and slaves in Virginia in 1705, he kind of heard rumors of nasty rumors and decided to come to Virginia and see if the rumors were true. And he pointed out the differences between indentured servants and slaves, but he really didn't get the like everyday experience because he was a political figure, and they were already known he was coming to the plantation, so they could have dressed it up in a better light to blind the eyes or shade the covers of what was really going on. And so to create a barrier and divide between servants and slaves, it really prevented slaves from being able to have a chance to like learn about the culture and history and really grasp what is going on. They are kind of put in a box, and it's it's for the slave owners and white Christian men specifically, who control the laws and what the slaves know and what they are experienced to. Slave men and women were considered the same. They both worked out in the fields, while the difference between servants is because they had well balanced diets and and better clothes. This kind of supported the idea that these white Christian servants were still better than the slaves, and this created a divide between slaves and servants. This would later be known as like manipulation and control. Number of indentured servants and slaves per probate in Inventory County, Virginia, 1637 to 1705. Wealth was you could see wealth was measured by other white wealthy men, generally by their neighbor, which was interesting because it just repeated the process that the people who are in charge, the people who are ruling this class of people, are white wealthy Christian men, and and the indentured servants started to decline in 1965, and that also compared to slaves, that's when it started to pick up. Slavery became more popular, and by 1689, when Parliament opened slavery to British merchants, they supported this supported the continued um, free labor and reduced labor that they already have, making it a more um, wealthy society. Here we see the enactment of hereditary slavery law in Virginia in 1662 Act. Um, they were creating a strict system and laws to prevent intermingling between African slaves and their owners. This would show that the um, this would show the hierarchy and kind of prevented the mixing of races, and so it wouldn't create chaos or confusion because they wanted a strong um, strong source of slavery. They wanted nothing to be messed with. They don't want any interferences to happen. So when a child is born, they created a law that completely um, goes off of how the mother is off the mother's status. If she's a slave, then the kid becomes a slave, and if the owner is white or the mother is white, the kid then becomes a free person. Though there was a fine for those who had kids who are white and had mixed race kids, there was a fine of double the amount of the Henning statutes. And this kind of increased the idea that we should not um, entangle with or intermingle with the slaves because of the consequences of doing so. And this just further promoted the strong hand the white Christian men had over the law and slavery itself in Virginia colonies.